Hello, my name is Timur Barrick, and I'm from the Brock University. And today I'm going to be talking about leveraging computational notebooks to teach web archives to a crowd of non-programmers. So for today's session, we're going to go through the following agenda. A brief look at what work files are and how we move to derivatives and how we take those derivatives and use them in computational notebooks. Then I'll take a look at two case studies of situations I've encountered in the past year that allowed me to do this exact thing. Take a web archive, create a derivative, and teach that in a classroom setting. So often when we encounter web archives, they're presented to us as work files, which are effectively large zip files with all of the different assets put together into one collection. These are great because they're comprehensive. They have everything you need. However, they are a bit unwieldy for end users that aren't really steeped in the dynamics of web archives. So what I think we need to do is strive towards creating derivatives of those large work files, and in particular, creating usable derivatives that will allow the content of these archives to be more accessible to researchers. So what I mean basically is creating CSV files of different parts of our work files or different components of our work files. For example, the full text of the web pages that we're looking at different timestamps, the metadata associated with items in our work files. If we can get to a spot where we can create these derivatives, we can handle them in a way I think that's more suitable for most researchers that aren't prepared to scaffold up into big environments that allow them to analyze works. So one of the key ways or most useful ways these days of analyzing tabular data or data generally is through a computational notebook. Probably familiar to most of you here. However, one really great example of an off-the-shelf computational notebook is Google's Colab environment. If you have access to a Google account, you have access to the platform, and it's pretty reliable. It runs well, and it allows you to import notebooks and share them with others in a way that allows them to copy it out to their drive. And it's a really low barrier for overhead in terms of setting up a workshop environment. Colab does a great job. So as I said, Colab is great at opening up and using tabular data. So if we move through our progression here, we start off with a work file that's a web archive. We create a derivative of some component of it that is a CSV file. We take that CSV file and then we open it in Colab, and then we have an environment to teach in that doesn't require a lot of overhead with respect to technical setup and expertise. So this is just a screen capture here of Colab Notebook going through the steps of opening up the meme generator data from LOC Labs and just demonstrating what one record would look like. So if we can imagine ourselves going through this progression, we can then take a Google Colab Notebook, present it to different audiences, and get different discussions going. And we don't need to necessarily spend too much time on the technical dynamics of how this all works. So what I have on the screen for you is an example of this in action. The COM4P35 class is business communications for professionals. And as you can see from the annotation here, we took a derivative of the COVID in Niagara archive harvested at ArcVit, and we restricted some content out to a particular subset of domains. And then we created a CSV file that we presented to the students to allow them to analyze the crisis communication that was going on with the different regions in our area presented in these pages captured in this archive. So we had a fairly comprehensive breakdown, lots of steps laid out for users, and all they needed to do is really click on the cells to execute them. On the screen here is a perfect example of a visualization meant to sort of illustrate the changes to a web page as it was crawled over different periods of time. And so, presumably whenever the spike happens, that's when content to the page has either been added or removed, so you can drill down and see exactly what's going on. So this worked fairly well. I think we had about a dozen students in this class. However, many of them, I think, were perplexed or focusing on more of the way the notebook works and sort of plucked away or pulled away from the actual content they were looking at. So that was particularly interesting to sort of watch that play out. Second case study I have to present for you is a workshop that we ran out of the lab last winter. It was open to all participants, not necessarily those affiliated with the university. We had, I think, an international audience show up. We had over 100 registrations. And basically, we took the same approach. We were going to introduce and teach components of how to analyze web archives. But what we did was use a Google Colab environment and a derivative data set. So the derivative data set was the meme generator data that is available on LOC Labs website. So this time around, we did the same sort of approach. We took this data set, we enriched it with a bunch of additional analysis and information, created a really comprehensive CSV file, and then presented it to our learners in a Google Colab environment. This time around, however, we made use of more widgets and forms that were part of the Google Colab environment. So here we have an example on the screen. As we're exploring the data, we ask users to take a look at different categories of memes and then ask at one point, type in the category of a meme and let's pick a random entry that is in that category. That made things go a little bit easier because you were able to sort of go past any code in terms of analysis and accumulating or getting the learners comfortable with what was going on. Interacting with a web form, I think, is fairly intuitive for most that spend time online. So in this case, there wasn't any real struggles. So that certainly helped out a lot. So all told, my research partner and I are really interested in exploring this idea of how we can use Google Colab and notebooks to look at derivatives of web archives as teaching and research material. So in further sort of movement towards that goal, we recently won a grant that effectively is going to look at some A/B testing of web archives via notebooks. So we're going to present learners with different types of notebooks with slight changes between them, and we're going to measure or attempt to measure what layout or what best practice of a notebook will facilitate sort of the comprehension of learners better. And the goal or the question we're seeking to answer is, can we create notebooks in a way that will be easier for learners to understand, particularly those that are not programmers? We want to reduce that barrier of entry to understanding this material as much as possible, and to sort of flatten out the amount of background knowledge that learners need to have with respect to programming languages. The other way we're bringing this to life is we're creating a standalone asynchronous tutorial that is based on a notebook environment called the Executable Book Project. I encourage you to check that out. It's really a great paradigm where it takes a notebook file, wraps it up with some nice web content, and allows you to place that anywhere on the web. And then if you configure it correctly, you can run your notebook interactively right in the web page that you're hosting your content in. So it's really great. So we're hoping to create material in this paradigm, in this environment, that'll be great standalone content that a learner can use, work through, and learn more about web archives, derivatives, and in a notebook environment. So thanks for watching this and for following along. If you have any questions about what we've tackled with this project, or if you'd like to know more, please get in touch with me. My email address is there on the screen. And we also have a project website that keeps track of all of our initiatives with respect to these web archives and collab investigations. Please check it out, and you'll see everything that we've accomplished. All right, thank you very much.